further ado, we'll go ahead and begin the presentation. Again, welcome to the PAC Talk conference call. PAC stands for People's Awareness Coalition. People's Awareness Coalition was founded in 1998 by L.B. Bork. He then released a book called The Red Amendment in 2000. It was his way of attempting to clean up a lot of the confusion and the messes that were happening in the Patriot movement at the time, in the freedom movement at the time. People's Awareness Coalition, more in-depth about that. People's meaning everyone in America, awareness meaning political and constitutional understanding, and coalition meaning lawful nationals working together. Some of the core philosophy points about what our group is before we really kind of get into the particulars about this call. PAC's philosophy, some of the core points are information. PAC's mission is to be an educational tool to get Americans up to speed on the current condition of the government and in order to identify the problems and, more importantly, the remedy. So there's, we're all about helping spread information and sharing information amongst each other. Another core philosophy is nonviolence. Our belief is that wars and rebellions are the two most destructive diseases in society, and that our tactics are administrative and have everything to do with just knowing and implementing the law rather than resisting and going against things and protesting and whatnot. And absolutely 110% against violence and provocation. So another one of the most important points in the PAC philosophy is cooperation. It's extremely important to stay connected with other PAC members once you become involved with the group. So we really like to stay close. We get together often online and on conference calls like this to make sure that everybody's on the same page and to kind of keep kicking our ideas, just making it to the next step and always progressing on different things that are going on, different projects we have. Also, we believe that building strong communities is really important. Barter and trade is obviously like one of the best ways of dealing with your community and finding how you fit in with everyone around you and stuff. So, it's really hard for people nowadays to just, go ahead and break the ice with your neighbors and try and get to know them and stuff. And sometimes we have some neighbors that are, less than agreeable. So that can also be a hindrance to that. But it's always, we encourage people to cooperate and be involved in their communities. One of the other philosophical points of PAC is purpose. Obviously, we have a very clear stated goal, and our purpose is to identify and correct the fundamental problem plaguing America for the last century and a half, and in order to restore the Republican governmental system as prescribed by the Constitution. And we're using the word Republican in the context of the people's thing, right? Representative government. So basically, we believe as the overarching philosophy of People's Awareness Coalition that freedom is responsibility. Responsibility for your actions and not running from your problems. So as a little prologue, okay, Gabe's saying here in the chat, before I go on further, he says, hello, everyone. He's saying that his new channel is called PAC Alliance 11 on YouTube. So you can go to PAC Alliance 11, and he's adding audio there, I guess maybe transferring over the previous calls that we've done. Okay, and so I guess moving on from there, I guess we'll just jump right back into the presentation. A little prologue, I guess, of what we're going to be getting into here. Some hypothetical questions here. How many of you would like to better understand why things are the way they are? We believe that in order to experience less anxiety about a complex, troubling subject, it's important to better understand that subject. And throughout this presentation, we'll explore this complex issue and identify the fundamental threat we face. The goal then being to identify the remedy. Some more hypotheticals. Why does it seem like they just make up the rules as they go? Why are so many people actually afraid of the government? And how many of you would like to feel more secure? I said in the last call, I think that the second question there, how many or why are so many people afraid of the government? I feel like that answers the first one. Or why are so many people afraid of the government? The answer to that is the first one, actually, right? It's because they make up the rules as they go, or so it seems. Anyway, PAC's goal is to help answer all these questions and much more by providing the information and the tools you need to achieve your lawful remedy. I like to always say it's better to teach a man to fish than to give a man a fish. Knowledge is power. So where do we begin, all right? So first of all, we'll begin by becoming familiar with important terms and concepts. We'll then explore how they fit together to see the picture more clearly. So some of those terms include status, citizen, power, and then the relationship or the juxtaposition, I should say, of rights versus privileges, liberty versus freedom, and legal versus lawful. I still need to add in the liberty versus freedom slide, but we could probably punch something up on our search engine, something real quick, and get into that. So we'll start with status here because it's really important to go over some terms that are used in legal speak in order to understand how they're used in legalese versus how they're used in everyday speech. The most important one, I believe, is status, and that's because that's exactly what People's Awareness Coalition targets as the remedy. You know, to the change that we help people to make in their own lives is the change of their status. And we'll get more into exactly why that is. But let's look at exactly what status means. Status is a position or rank in relation to others. That an example would be the status of being father, right? So father in relation to your son. Also, it could be the relative rank in a hierarchy of prestige, especially high prestige. He enjoys an elite status would be an example. The definition that we're concerned with here is this one: the condition of a person or thing in the eyes of the law. Okay, so and then finally we have the state or condition with respect to circumstances, like the status of my health, the status of negotiations, that sort of thing, the status of the construction project in my bathroom. Some examples of status are child or parent, married or unmarried, servant or master, living or dead, and finally citizenship status. Obviously, all of these examples can be changed, and many of them do change throughout your life. So that's just kind of showing you that status can change. It's within your power to change your status, and there's nothing wrong with it at all. So citizenship status is the focus of is the most important one to us today, because that's what we change. That's what we help people change, their citizenship status. And again, we'll get into more exactly why that is the point that we focus on. But first, we'll look a little bit more about what citizen is, what a citizen is. We'll look at the definition of citizen from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. It says that a citizen is a person who owes allegiance to a government and is protected by it, presumably. So government, we believe, taken from this quote from the Gettysburg Address made by Abraham Lincoln, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So for this reason, taking this quote into account, it's our belief that citizens bear some responsibility, at least, for the actions of the government. After all, they are part of what makes or constitutes the government, right? By their contributions and their acquiescence, they empower the systems that form. And taking this principle into account, we've determined that invoking the inherent right to remove oneself from an objectionable system is the single most effective way of disempowering it. So you can start to see, just from those last three slides, if we look at what status means and what citizen means, you can basically see that, we're actually, our goal is to bring the federal government back into its intended limited function, which requires disempowering it to a degree. We are not an abolitionist sort of group. Oh, wow, I can see, I think, Mylene right now for some reason. What happened there? She's like on the backdrop. How did that happen? Oh, this is such a quirky little program that we use. Anyway, I'll move on now. So we focus on wanting to bring the government back into its limited function, and basically, we want to disempower the government to a degree. So let's talk a little bit about exactly what is power. Power, in the term that we are, in the sense that we are concerned with. This is a definition also taken from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. It means the legal or official authority, capacity, or right. Legal, official, or official authority, capacity, or right. Right? Okay. Another definition is possession of control, authority, or influence over others. So, for example, a parent should have power over the child, not the child having power over the parent. This also can be a sort of synonymous definition is the creation can never be more powerful than the creator. That is a maxim, an ancient legal maxim there that is very important, and we'll get into more exactly about why a little bit later on. But a little bit more about power, and more specifically, legitimate power. Where does legitimate power come from? So governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. And everyone should be very familiar with that quote. It's taken from the Declaration of Independence. It's one of the, very early on. So simply put, legitimate power comes from consent. We basically work on helping people remove their consent because we believe that many people agree that this government has gotten outside of its original intended limited function. And so we would like to bring that situation a little bit closer back to becoming a reality, the legitimate limited function of the government, the federal government. Because we would like it to be more in line with what's known as the order of nature. The order of nature basically is the hierarchy of power, the correct way that power is supposed to flow. It's more formally known or more formally defined as the physical universe considered as an orderly system subject to natural laws, not human or supernatural laws, made-up laws. What that means is basically the way that things sort of fall together, like a parent having power over a child. That's a really sort of a microcosm of a power dynamic that would align with the order of nature. So now we will sort of transpose that idea of the order of nature, and we'll see how that relates to our intended governmental system as set up by the founders. Because before the Constitution was written in ancient law, in common law, in ancient civilizations considered the following to be the true order of nature. And that would be that God is at the top of the hierarchy. God then cedes some unalienable rights to individuals, his creation. And then individuals then, through free association, they voluntarily group together and they create groups. So the groups of the states would be the creation of the individuals that have come together for their mutual benefit and protection. And then lastly, we have the federal government in the example, in the American example. We have the federal government because all the groups of the states, they unionized, they got together, they created the federal government. So for all intents and purposes, if we look at, if we take the maxim, the creation can never be more powerful than the creator, then in this dynamic, the federal government is at the least powerful rung of this system. God being the highest, then individuals, then groups or states, and then government, federal government. So as we kind of start to see the picture becoming clear, that the concepts we've covered so far add up to your rights, basically, your rights, not privileges, your rights. Another quote from the Declaration of Independence that we'll start to examine now is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there we see that there was obviously a belief among everyone that signed the Declaration of Independence, at least, that people got their rights from God or from a creator, right? Endowed by the Creator. And it also mentions very explicitly here that they're unalienable rights or unalienable rights. So let's look a little bit more about that word unalienable. Basically, it means impossible to take away or give up permanently, because it was not given to you by any person. So they can't justifiably take it from you because they did not give it to you. So you can see, as we get a little bit further on, there must have been some sort of change. Something must have happened to basically get us to where we are now, where it seems like our rights are, we're kind of walking that razor-thin line of, they can be infringed on, kind of at the whim. Your rights cannot be taken and they cannot be given up permanently, but you can decide not to value them. You can decide not to protect them, and in essence, you can give them up voluntarily. But they're always there waiting for you to wake up. So, and then here on the slide that we have Homer Simpson here with this thought bubble, and it means, you mean men and women have unknowingly been given up their rights or in their place in the order of nature? They must have been tricked. But how? And so that is where we begin to talk about more specifically the 14th Amendment, which is the subject of the book, the Red Amendment, which is a very extremely in-depth analysis of the 14th Amendment, a little history, how it came about, a lot of different relative information there to sort of show what else was happening in the world at the time, and that there was this sort of trend of communism that was sort of being born sort of around that era. So the 14th Amendment, the 14th Amendment status called citizen of the United States. Prior to this, all individuals were members of their state. And Frank puts in the chat here that, and he's correct, this is Marxism. This is stealth Marxism being implemented in the United States. And I would say that the 14th Amendment was a seed, a very potent and viable seed that grew into what we have now, 150 years later. The phrase privileges and immunities in the right is, or in the law, is opposed to rights. It's not the same thing. It allows government to change, suspend, or ignore these attributes at any time because, after all, the government created citizenship to the United States. So that would be the creation of the government. And then that creation was given to you without your consent because it was given to you before you were aware, right at birth in many, many cases, the vast majority. So we'll take a look real quick about, I found an interesting definition here about what privileges are. I found it in West's Encyclopedia of American Law, and it is as follows. A privilege is a particular benefit, advantage, or immunity enjoyed by a person or class of people that is not shared by others. It is a power of exemption against or beyond law. It is not a right, but rather exempts one from the performance of a duty, obligation, or liability. So the most important part of that definition, I believe, is that it expressly says it is not a right. There is a difference. The 14th Amendment created citizenship. It imposed citizenship on every person within every state at birth. It made that citizenship the predominant citizenship, but also grants dual citizenship to each of the states. The state citizenship being the secondary or the subordinate status. The predominant status is United States citizen, okay? And again, keep in mind, this is the creation of the federal government. The amendment ignores the order of nature, also known as government de jure, and replaces it with man's law, which is known as government de facto. That's important to know, and we'll go into exactly what those terms mean now, de jure and de facto. They also could be synonymous with lawful or legal. De jure sort of being a synonym for lawful, and de facto sort of being a synonym for legal. So now let's go in, because this is something that actually kind of took me a while to understand, lawful versus legal. So lawful means it's defined as in accordance with the law of the land, okay? So that would be sort of like when you hear somebody say birthright. Wherever you're born, if your parents are there, I assume if your parents are there legally, then that would be the place in which you have a lawful right to be at. They can deport you from that place because you're born there. They obviously can arrest you and hold you if you do illegal things in that area that you have a birthright to, but no one can tell you to leave lawfully. Now, legally, they can, as we see with what happened to the American Indian, the Native Americans. Now, that was a function of legal mumbo-jumbo and horse hockey that they basically imposed on the Indians who were, unable to work together. And, in time, I should say, they didn't really come up with a cohesive resistance to the federal government. And even if they did, I guess, it probably would have eventually failed anyway, because the federal government was very determined to do what they did. In any case, I digress. More about lawful. Lawful conforms to natural law. Again, it's in accordance with the law of the land. It means permitted, sanctioned, or justified by law. And lawful properly implies a thing conformable to it or enjoyed by law. Okay, so that would basically be the good version, I should say. Right now, let's move on to what legal is. Okay, legal, more or less, means pertaining to the understanding, the exposition, and the administration and the practice of law. So legal means, we're following every sort of letter that's written down here. We're like a robot. We don't have any feelings. We don't have any consideration for our humanity. We're just going to read exactly what's here on this paper. We're going to execute it and sort of expunge ourselves from any feelings of whether or not it's right or wrong, actually. Because a lot of laws, so-called laws or codes or statutes or whatever that are on the books, they're legal functions, but they're not really justified. Like locking somebody in prison for possessing a plant, right? For possessing a very small portion of a plant, actually, in some places in the country. You can actually have your freedom taken from you by possessing a small portion of a plant. Legal looks more to the letter of the law, right? Lawful to the spirit of the law. But what's the intention here, right? Legal is more appropriate for conformity to positive rules of law, and lawful for accord with ethical principle. Okay, so again, it's kind of more, let's use our humanity. Let's look at what's the intention here. Again, and so a little bit more on legal. Legal imports rather that the forms of law are observed, that the proceeding is correct in method, and that the rules are prescribed have been obeyed. Lawful means that the right is actual in substance, that the moral quality is secured. Now, Mylene has said a few things here that once the Indians have been removed from their birthright land, after so many years, the U.S. Fed Gov can turn the eyes of the law and say the Indians have abandoned their land. This would be a lawful way to get their land. And that's true, I guess. After generations, they're no longer really claiming their land. Generations have gone by. Maybe the land has been used in other ways, and other people are there. Other people have been there legally and then born there. So now their descendants are there lawfully, so on and so on. So now the mess has just kind of progressed.
Yeah, can I add something there?
Absolutely.
Something that the federal government has done is they've given them their lands, in the form of these reservations, and they've put so many names on the title for them to do anything with it. It's just it would be a magnanimous feat. A lot of the people have passed away. Some of the people have moved off the reservation and out and about, and they don't keep in contact. That's another way that they use to control their lands and keep them from doing anything with them. That's all I wanted to add.
They effectively destroyed their culture, and without a culture, without people having a strong culture to really tie them together and have something to be proud of, what happens? They splinter away. They just go off, and they kind of sort of fold into the popular culture of the time. That's why. What do they call it? Multiculturalism. Multiculturalism can't work in a long-term sense. Everybody gets amalgamated together, and culture is important. Everybody should be proud of where they came from, where their parents came from, and their parents, and their parents, and their lineage. So, that's a little bit of an aside from the presentation, but important nonetheless. It's a good example. So Mylene further says that the Trail of Tears moved them far away from their native lands. The reservations were not their native lands, obviously, and legally giving them new land, a.k.a. a reservation under the U.S. federal government, right? Yeah, so they've been dispossessed, I guess. They've been disenfranchised. And that's a very, very sad example. I really feel very badly for all those peoples. Anyway, a little bit more back onto the topic that we have here. So we just explored the difference between legal and lawful. We have a really good example there that we kind of dove into. And, I want to move on now a little bit into the new order. Now that the implementation of the 14th Amendment has been so deeply, I guess, instituted, explored, whatever. It's been well established. It's had many generations of time to establish over 150 years. And so we have a new order. We have a new formation of a new order now. And that would be that the federal government, keep in mind again, the federal government created citizenship. The creation can never be more powerful than the creator. Okay? The creator being the federal government. Everyone else being the creation. So the federal government has basically placed itself at the highest rung of power here in the new order. And then cedes some power to the states. It is able to dictate what the states do within the states, essentially deleting the 10th Amendment. And it's able to have a direct relationship with all the people in all the states. And that's a violation of another amendment. I can't remember. But so essentially the federal government's at the top of the list. The groups and states are next in line. And then last but not least is the individuals. Well, last and least in this example is individuals. And guess what's been taken out completely? God. This system is known as collectivism, and that is where the group is always considered more important than the happiness and the well-being of the individual, as opposed to individualism, where it's believed that the rights and happiness of the individuals are considered more important than the collective. And obviously, when you are in a group of people that you're, when you're in that group as a function of preserving your own mutual benefit and security, then of course you're going to do things to help the group. Of course you're going to help your fellow group members. Of course you're going to put aside your selfish interests and your own personal greed to help the group, for the greater good, I guess you could say. But that's a voluntary status. That's a voluntary condition that you're doing that. You would like to do that. I mean, it's called charity. It's called being a good steward. And God calls on all of us to be good stewards for the world, right? So there's individualism is great, but we need to work together. But we want to preserve individual freedoms. Any individual should be free to leave their group at any time if they decide that they no longer agree with the direction of the group, if they don't think that it's in their best interest to be part of that group. That would be an example of free association, a function of free association. You can come and go as you please. So basically what this all kind of boils down into is that political power comes from groups of people that share the same status. They call this a body politic when they talk about it in law. This is why the states seem to have no power. It's because all the people in the states are United States citizens. They have no rights and no protection of the Constitution of the state wherein they reside. And that's another important term that's gone over, reside. That's gone over extensively in the book, The Red Amendment, written by L.B. Bork, which can be found at redamendment.net. And so if anybody's new to the call, which I think most people that are here have been here before, but if anyone's new to the call, this might be a lot to take in, but it's absolutely the truth. And there's also this metaphysical law that evil has to follow. And, if I ever have a chance to have a sit-down Q&A with God one day, then I'm going to ask him, or him or her or it or whatever, I'll ask, why did you make it this way? Why did you make this metaphysical law? The metaphysical law I'm referring to is that evil has to tell you what it's about to do to you. Otherwise, it's not. They will gain bad karma from it. So if they tell you what they're going to do, then they believe that they're expunged from any sort of repercussions for their evil, because they gave you a warning, and you either didn't read the warning or you just didn't care enough to pay attention. So evil has to warn you about what it's going to do. That's what basically the 13th Amendment was about, and the 14th Amendment, I believe. The 13th Amendment opens the door for you to get out, and the 14th Amendment basically puts up iron bars around everywhere else. And a lot of people don't really know where that exit door is. We'll talk about that very, very soon in this presentation. We'll talk about that now, actually. How do we fix it? How do we fix it? Well, the best way to correct the current situation is to bring the power back to the states. This is the way it was intended by the founders. You can do this by correcting your status to being a state national, a national of a state. That means pledging allegiance to a state, thereby bringing political power back to the states and bringing the federal government back into its intended function. This can't be done by standing on your porch one day and just shouting at the sky and say, I pledge allegiance to my state. No, it has to be done with witnesses, and it has to be done administratively, and you have to give notices to people, because this is what's known as acting in good faith. If you were to just make this decision on your own and then proceed to stop paying taxes, proceed to stop registering your vehicle, and proceed to stop with any sort of licensing that you may have had, then you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble, because this is what's known as acting in bad faith. because you didn't tell anybody what you were doing. So basically, the process that we provide is a process of helping you to act in good faith by making notices to everybody that it's pertinent to, and in a very official and a very concrete, solid way of making a declaration of allegiance. So People's Awareness Coalition is here to provide the remedy, but we need your help because it's been the mission of PAC since 1998 to bring constitutional understanding and education to Americans. But in time, it was realized that most Americans weren't quite ready. Now, what I mean by that is they either weren't ready because they had financial ties and leaning on the system. They were dependent on the system to a point where if they were to terminate their status, if they were to expatriate or repatriate a state, there's so many different ways to say it, but if they were to do it, then they would have ended up taking a huge hit to their standard of living. It might have put them out in the poorhouse. It might have, a lot of people are sort of in a position where they've gotten dependent on the system and they're just not able to do it. A lot of people don't understand this information, and for that reason, they're not able to do it because they reject it outright. And but anyway, in time it was realized most Americans aren't quite ready, and so then PAC Alliance was formed. A PAC Alliance basically is everyone that's in the periphery around the main group of People's Awareness Coalition, which would be the Nationals, the lawful Nationals. And everybody else that is interested in the information is known as the Alliance. And we all work together so closely that there really isn't a whole lot of difference other than the fact that some people have actually, done the paperwork and gone through the process because they were ready. Me personally, I have gone through the process. I'm a national of the state of Virginia, and so far I am 2 or 3 years in. I think it would have been 2 years in October. I should probably know that. I should probably know that a little bit better. But anyway, basically, the minute that you put your paperwork in the mail is when you have been relieved of your status. So PAC is here to help. People's Awareness Coalition has released a lot of information that can be found at pacinlaw.us in the form of white papers. If you don't have any money right now for the book, you can go cruise around on pacinlaw.us, and you'll find a lot of information there. You can also look at the Facebook group, Official PAC Alliance, and you can go there to, kind of get started or start to chat with people that are more involved with the group, which, we all have a ton of information that we can hand down. We're not stingy really with information. We only like to keep away information that could end up being dangerous, that could get people in trouble, such as certain things that should be done in a certain order. There's a certain order to doing things, and if we just sort of gave out any sort of information that anybody asked for, and then they went to try to implement that remedy without doing some of the prerequisite steps, then it could turn out very badly for them, and then that would reflect very badly on us as a group. So certain information is withheld in the beginning, but as you become more involved, more doors open. But even if you're not in a position to change your status, you can assist those that are. You can volunteer your time to assist with different projects and know that you are contributing to a new, better future for all Americans. If you're ready to learn more, you can access the best information on this subject by getting a copy of the Red Amendment, which again can be found at redamendment.net. Also, I have copies for sale, outdated 2012 copies, which aren't a whole lot different than the 2016 version, but the 2016 version does have more footnotes, and it has a glossary included. That basically concludes the PowerPoint presentation. For anybody that didn't hear me at the beginning of the call say this, you can go to YouTube and you can hear any of the past presentations that we've done. If you go to YouTube and then you go to PAC Alliance 11, that's the page that our friend Gabe has set up. We really appreciate that, and I want to say thank you, Gabe, for setting up the YouTube page so that we have an archive now of all the different calls that we've done, and also the radio show appearances that have happened, and there are more that are supposed to happen soon. And I'm sure as things unfold and as more people get involved, then we're going to have lots of material to share with everybody. So at this time, I'd like to open up the. Gabe says, yeah, have them go to Gabe Halo for now. He's in the process of transferring everything from his personal YouTube account is called Gabe Halo. That's Gabe, G-A-B-E, Halo, H-A-L-O. And that was his personal page that he ended up using a lot for People's Awareness Coalition, and we really appreciate that. And now he's actually set up a specific page for PAC Alliance, for the People's Awareness Coalition. And the URL, let's see, let's open this URL. Okay, so that is to Gabe Halo's page. I think Mylene is probably the only one that can see that URL. If anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to say, then they can press *2 on their phone right now. And you can just say, hey, you can introduce yourself, you can talk about any sort of information that you have on your mind. One thing that I wanted to bring up that we started to talk about in the Facebook group was cryptocurrencies. And I would like to maybe just throw that out there and maybe just hear what people have to say, your skepticism, if you outright hate it, if you outright love it, anybody that, that has anything to say about cryptocurrency. The reason I bring this up is because it's been attempted a few times for the People's Awareness Coalition to have fund drives, fundraisers. And it's been a problem because you have to have an EIN or an FEIN. That is a number that's designated to you when you create a corporation. And or you have to use a Social Security number. We don't use these sort of numbers. We don't affiliate with these sort of numbers because they are functions or gifts, I guess you could call it, from the federal government, creations of the federal government. And so we are expressly prohibited from using any sort of number that is affiliated with the federal government. So that's why it's become a problem to do crowdfunding and to do different things like that for the People's Awareness Coalition, because you always need this number. And I feel like cryptocurrency, not only do I think that it has good, solid footing for the future, that I just don't think cryptocurrencies are going to go away. Now that the genie's out of the bottle, I think it's never going to go away. I think that cryptocurrencies are equivalent to the Internet in the sense that when the Internet was first invented, it was being used, mainly as a communication between, scientific labs and government and stuff. And there was the regular person on the street hadn't really heard about it, never really used it. And I guess when even as it started to first evolve into what it is now, it kind of took a lot of people a while to get used to this new concept and to realize all the different ways that could work for them. It's just a tool. The Internet is just a tool. It can be used for bad things and it can be used for good things. Obviously, we basically all found each other on the Internet. And I think that I kind of am starting to look at cryptocurrency in the same way, that it is a tool. It could be used by People's Awareness Coalition because you don't really need a government sanctioned number to interact with it. And we could use it to set up payments. You can use it. We had floated the idea of doing a yearly membership fee of a small amount I don't know what that amount is. I think this is still just sort of an idea in the mill. But one thing that you can do with a cryptocurrency that's called Ethereum is you can set up a contract that is saved in what's called the blockchain. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, then, maybe I could find you could go to YouTube and just type in what's a blockchain and take a look at that, or, do a search engine it and do a little bit of research. But anyway, this cryptocurrency called Ethereum, it allows you to set up a contract on the blockchain, which basically would mean that if you set up a contract that says, I, Levi, or let's say it's People's Awareness Coalition. People's Awareness Coalition requires $50 each year for a membership fee. Let's just say that hypothetically. And everybody that wants to sign up for People's Awareness Coalition has to go and get 50, let's say 50 USD, which could be who knows how much Ether. It could be half of an Ether. It could be a quarter of an Ether or something like that, because, it's a different currency. So it's going to fluctuate. It's going to have a different value. So maybe People's Awareness Coalition could say it costs the equivalent of $50 in Ether each year. And basically when you sign up, you could agree to a contract on the Ether network. And as long as you keep a little bit of Ether in your Ether wallet, it will get automatically deposited each year, and it can never be manipulated or changed because the contract is held on everybody's computer in the entire network. And as long as everybody's computer has an identical ledger, then everything's good. If anybody ever changes their ledger, it gets rejected automatically. So that prevents anybody from hacking the agreement. That prevents anybody from changing it post facto and trying to swindle anybody. Another great thing about it is that it can't be printed out of nowhere. There's only a set amount that are ever going to be found. And so devaluation is out the window. Another great thing about it is that it's decentralized, which basically, all the banking and all the money exchanges that we undergo now are all going through a central system, a central bank, which is actually one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. So actually, cryptocurrency in that way is opposed to communism because it is opposite of the central banking idea. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling on a little bit about this because I just have started to discover it, and I had a little bit of a discussion with some people on the PAC website or on the PAC group on Facebook, and it just really sort of got me really interested in it. So, I don't know, if anybody else is interested in that, you could raise your hand and we could talk a little bit about it. If you have any questions about that, or if you have any questions about anything I went over in the presentation, then feel free to raise your hand by pressing *2 at any time. I think that, it's just something that we should consider as an alternative to using crowdsourcing things like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, because we're just not allowed to use that stuff. Up until now, we basically have had to use straw men to interact with those sorts of systems. And basically what that is basically somebody that's still tied to the system, but maybe somebody that's in the alliance that, that agrees with our philosophy and with our direction and our goals and wants to help us, which is great. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing, illegal about it at all. But, yeah, so I know LB's probably got some things to say about Bitcoin. He says it's of the system training for a cashless society. Those dealing in it become targets of the IRS. So citizens that deal in Bitcoin become targets of the IRS. I don't really see how it's relevant to anybody that isn't a citizen, right? So the IRS point, I don't see how that's really relevant to anybody that isn't a citizen. Trading for a cashless society, yes, I do agree with that. That's troubling. But basically what we have here is, the difference that I sort of brought up was that, wouldn't it be great if they had a centralized system that was all digital money? Then they could just turn off the chip in your hand, and they could say, oh, you don't have any more money. But, without that, you can, with a decentralized trading platform, I could send somebody some funds in California, and it would get there in 10 minutes. Unlike gold or silver, really, which is basically would have to be sent through the mail and actually is prohibited in the USPS. They tell you not to do that. If they found it, they could confiscate it by their own rules, right? So sending gold and silver in the mail, you can get gold and silver in the mail. I've bought gold and silver in the mail, but it's sent registered, and they disclose exactly what's in there, so it isn't private at all. Tangible precious metals obviously are something that I have because I like to have a diverse amount of different things that I feel like protect my wealth. And so absolutely, I'm holding tangible precious metals, and I would absolutely suggest that everybody has a really diverse way of protecting their wealth. But my point with Bitcoin and with things like that is that it is decentralized and it is instant, and it could be helpful for crowdfunding. And so I understand that, the whole fact that it's digital is is a problem. That's an issue for some people. But like I said, it's a tool and it exists. And for that reason, it's kind of like, well, why not use it? If you're using it for your own mutual benefit, for your group, that doesn't mean that you have to put all your eggs in that basket, though. So maybe as time goes by and we start to see a little bit more about the nature of these different cryptocurrencies that are coming out, that maybe it will become a little bit more feasible, a little bit more sort of acceptable to use these things. But yeah, it's of the system. Back to LB's points, it's of the system, but so is FRNs. If anything's of the system more than Bitcoin, it's FRNs, right? Federal Reserve notes. They're based on nothing. They print them at will, so they've devalued the currency incredibly, right? Yes, Mylene says faith and credit is connected to land ownership. LB says, sure, left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, but who knows what may happen. It's of the system, the deep system. I wouldn't touch it. Yeah, so I figured that LB would be really skeptical of it. But, LB uses Federal Reserve notes. So, that's of the system. LB uses the roads to get around in this town. That's of the system, too. So I guess, I guess I'm not trying to, gold and silver are considered portable land as they are of the land. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point there, Mylene. That's pretty cool. I never really guess I considered it that way. So I guess you're saying that they've extracted it from the land and it's proof of work, So yeah, there's been a lot of work that went into mining it and stuff, and it does hold its value. It's gone on for 6,000 years now, so maybe close to 6,000 years. Gold and silver have been always used in that way. And I have nothing against gold and silver, So these things aren't mutually exclusive in my mind. I think gold and silver are great. People should hold gold and silver, but when it comes to being a medium of exchange, it's exactly the same as a paper dollar, because gold and silver it's got a value. It fluctuates based on things that are going on at the time. But imagine if you had $1 million, if you had $1 million in gold, you wouldn't really be able to carry that with you. If your house burnt down, if your house was burning down, then it would be maybe really hard to, go in there and grab that silver, before it got melted or something. Or maybe if something was happening, if there was something that was going on and you had to leave your house really fast, and all your silver and your gold is buried in your backyard. It's not really that convenient to get to. But on the other hand, cryptocurrency is saved on the blockchain. You don't actually have to save anything except for a string of numbers. That string of numbers, you could write it on a piece of paper and put it in your wallet. You could etch it on a gold coin. You could etch it on a gold coin, your number. You could stamp it on a little block of aluminum or something. Something that's going to last longer. Wouldn't get. You could engrave it on a piece of iron or something. Your wallet address, and then that's transferable. Your entire house could burn down. All your Federal Reserve notes could be up in smoke. All your silver could be melted down, and you could obviously sift through the ashes and probably recover most of it. But in terms of what we're talking about here is just a medium of exchange for the purpose of maybe doing a crowdfunding campaign or something like that. Obviously, most people are dealing with Federal Reserve notes, and so most of the crowdsourcing has to be done through the banks, and you need permission from the bankers to do that. But you don't need permission, and you don't need oversight from a higher power to trade in crypto. There are advantages and disadvantages to all forms of value, as Frank said there, and that's a very astute point, Frank. That's really great. Gold on the one hand is sort of the most trusted. I'll get to that point in a second, Frank. Gold is the most trusted form of wealth security, I guess, and as a medium of exchange, it works great too. But it's really heavy, it's cumbersome. It would be really hard to carry around, $100,000 worth of gold to go buy a house or something. So if Frank says, what if the internet goes down? Okay, well, the internet is decentralized. Okay, so I'm willing to bet that there are probably more than hundreds of computers that are protected from any sort of EMP or electronic attack. They're encased in a Faraday cage or they're underground. And so that is the way that the internet would survive. The only way that the internet would go down is if every computer on Earth was vaporized at one time. Because as long as somebody can build a computer and then connect through wires to another computer, then that's the internet. Okay? And so as soon as you get invested in cryptocurrency, what happens is everybody has a ledger on their computer, and everybody's ledger is identical. Okay, so what if this and what if that, right? What if they made gold? What if they made it illegal to possess gold? Okay, that could happen too, right? That would be some sort of thing that could happen. Does that mean that you don't want to have gold? No. I mean, because gold is obviously the big Mac Daddy on the block in terms of wealth preservation and distribution, right? Gabe says we'll be forced to talk to each other in person. Oh no, yeah, yeah, no, that'd be terrible, wouldn't it? Yeah, but it would actually be a lot harder for me to talk to you, Gabe, right? If the internet didn't exist, if it didn't exist, we'd have to use the mail. And if something so bad happened that it actually destroyed the entire internet, then I wonder if mail would still be running too. I'd have to do a telegram if the wires still existed. If the wires existed, then why wouldn't we just establish an internet connection? That's a whole lot better anyway than a telegram or even a phone call. The internet used to run over the phone lines primarily. And, I feel like if it's possible to make a phone call, it's possible to make an internet connection. So I don't think the internet's going anywhere anytime soon. That's like saying, what if a giant meteor hit the world? What if I died tomorrow? You know what I mean? What would happen to my cryptocurrency then? We could go what if for days. But I think that it's one thing that's been on my mind is that this new cryptocurrency thing, it draws all sorts of debate and and ideas out of people. This is a great conversation we're having. But one thing I want to lay on the table as a fact, it's here and it's here to stay, okay? It's not going anywhere. You can either use it, decide to use it, or not. That's fine too. But what I will say is that if you decided to get some now, I don't think it would be a bad idea. Because look at this. Last year, Bitcoin was just, or maybe it was 2 years ago, it had just gotten over $1,000 per Bitcoin. A couple of years before that, it was $100 a Bitcoin. Right now, it's $8,000 per Bitcoin. Okay? It's gone up 800%. And that is a meteoric rise. It's taken a couple hits, and it's caused a lot of people to lose faith when it takes a hit. But it never goes down past its low point, and it always comes back up higher. So right now, I think, for me anyway, not financial advice to anybody, but for me, I think that I would like to try and get some just because I think it's going to accrue value, and I could use it. I could use it, obviously. I could, a lot of different vendors are taking Bitcoin. A lot of online places are taking Bitcoin and stuff and other cryptos. And another thing, too, is that, it says, Frank made the point, Rothschilds and Rockefellers are deeply invested in cryptocurrencies. Well, the reason is because they see the writing on the wall. Fiat currency is going to be the way of the dinosaur very soon. Very soon, I think. Fiat currency is going to die. Cryptocurrency is going to take over, and there will be centralized cryptocurrency. There's already cryptocurrency out there that the United States government has invested in and created. I would never touch that. Okay, that's the one that I would be wary of. But this Bitcoin was created by basically, computer programmers, not banking cartels, not governments. Yes, fiat currency is dying. So then what? What are you left with then? Okay, I looked up the word fiat once in Bouvier, and it says it involves an order by a judge or something. I wonder why they named that car the Fiat, What the heck was that all about? I don't know. Anyway, I believe that fiat currency is dying, and I believe that is why the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds had invested in cryptocurrencies. And they actually came to the party kind of late, if you ask me, because I think they didn't really start to become really heavy in it until a couple of years ago after it had already gotten up into the thousands. My brother-in-law has made probably, $150,000 on cryptocurrencies just in the last year. It's crazy, So, I've kind of had him in my ear, and I've seen the results, too. So I guess that's why I'm a little bit more convinced on the side of it working. So Gabe made the point, I'm concerned about hackers when it comes to digital money. Okay, I posted a couple of things in the PAC Alliance think tank, or in the official PAC think tank or whatever, I forget what it's called. Anyway, it explains what the blockchain is, okay? And I'll try and go over it really quick here. Blockchain basically is every time, you should check it out. It's really important, and it totally answers your question about hackers. Hacking isn't possible with cryptocurrencies. The reason why is because every block creates a hash, which is a string of letters and numbers, and it's unique. It's like a snowflake to that block. And then the next block is basically built using that hash. So what happens is all the information from all the transactions from that block are basically crunched down, and they use the computers that are on the network to generate a hash that basically when you use a program called SHA-256, it creates a unique number for any sort of phrase or anything that you put in the block. If you put the number 2 in the data block, it would give you a hash that's the same length as if you put the Bible. You could literally write the Bible into the data block, and it would give you a unique hash for the Bible. And then 50 years from now, you could go back into SHA-256, and you put the same exact information in, and it will give you the same exact hash. every single time. So the way that Bitcoin is unhackable is that if anybody were to change any information in the past, then it would change the hash, and then it would change every subsequent block. And then that wouldn't match everybody else's computer that's on the network, and the network would identify that there's a problem, and it would reject the hacker. It would reject the hacked blockchain. So that in that way, nobody can give themselves Bitcoins that they don't have. Nobody can take Bitcoins from you that you don't give them unless they found your key. You know what I mean? But that's the same thing as if someone found the key to your car, they could steal it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. So basically, watch the video that I put on the group. It explains exactly how the blockchain works and how it's not hackable. And the only thing that I'm skeptical about is how is there a limited amount, and how is that controlled? So they say that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins mined. I think they're only a third of the way through it, and I did the math because a certain amount of Bitcoin is awarded to the miners. The miners are the people that basically come up with the hash. They are the ones that are using the computing power to process all the data to make the hash, okay? And so they're awarded by the system with Bitcoins, and that basically means that, yes, they are created from nothing at that point. But the system claims it's only going to make 21 million. And by my calculations, that will basically be up in the year 2039. That is when Bitcoin will become basically not viable anymore, because then there won't be any incentive for people to mine anymore. And so then I think at that point, then Bitcoin might just drop off. It might not be worth anything anymore at that point, unless they find out some way to patch it to make it. Maybe they'll add fees or something to any transaction, and then the fees would go to the people that mine. So that's something to consider. But the idea is that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins, and there will never be any more, and they can't add any more. They can never change the system to make it so, we're going to decide to add 21 million more Bitcoin. And then what happens, everyone's Bitcoins are worth half as much now, right? So that would be a bad thing. And I don't know exactly what limits the number of crypto. But, I mean, I don't know. Basically, this entire thing, I was just trying to get across the point that it's just a medium of exchange. It's just a tool, and it could help PAC, I think, because we would be able to do crowdfunding, and not only that, but if we bought, if we were able to throw in together $500 worth of Bitcoin or something, and then we let it sit there for a year, and then go back, what happens? You go back and it's worth, $2,500 now. It could happen. It's happened. It's actually happened just in the last year. It's gone up 800%. So it's something to think about. It could be something to, if you are a gambling type of person, I guess. If you think that you could, yeah, no problem. I put a couple of videos up in the PAC group. It's a secret group, but so most of the people that are on the call here now probably aren't in that group. But it's really interesting. If you go to YouTube and you type in, I'm going to type it in. Hang on, blockchain. Blockchain explained simply. If you type in blockchain explained simply, there will be a video that comes up with a woman's face that's in black and white, okay? And that video really helped me to understand exactly how blockchain works. And blockchain, if Bitcoin is equal to email, then blockchain is equal to the internet, okay? So that's my analogy there for anybody that might be still listening. Yeah, so it's worth checking out. I hope that Frank and Gabe, I hope that you guys check it out, because I would like to talk to you a little bit more about your ideas and thoughts about the whole, it being the cashless society and stuff and being of the system and all that. I would like to know if your opinion doesn't change at all after you've watched the videos, because I was really skeptical about it, because I like to have things in my hand. When I buy something, I like to have something in my hand. I like to see it, touch it, put it away in my drawer, lock it away, come back, pet it later. No, I'm just kidding. But I like to see the things, So I was really skeptical about it, but I feel like I've watched a lot of my friends and stuff actually really, benefit off of, becoming involved in it and stuff. And so now I'm like, well, there's more people that I know that are, all right, I will, Frank. There's more people that are, more vendors and stuff that are starting to take it. Like, for instance, Expedia takes Bitcoin. So you could travel, you could stay at a hotel, you can do all that sort of stuff and pay with it, pay for it with crypto. Anyway, does anybody have anything they want to say? Press *2 on your phone if you want to raise your hand or you have any comments or anything, because I think I might wrap up the call here in just a minute if nobody has anything they want to say. There's been a lot of crazy things happening in the world, and so I just want to say thanks to everybody that's come on the call. I'm glad to see so many people on the call each week now, and I just really appreciate it, and I'd hope that you guys would kind of get the word out and get your friends on these calls and stuff. But I guess on that point, I'll just go ahead and say good night and God bless everyone, and I'll see you again soon.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.